But I think we also have to look at a foreign policy that's run by tweet. We have a foreign policy that is disheveled. You all don't even have talking points about what the objectives were for kidnapping Nicolas Maduro. And the last part about it is, to your point, if Democrats have to hammer this, and stop writing these long-ass tweets and essays. Like, he is choosing Venezuelans over Americans. He's choosing Caracas over the needs of these people, of our soybean farmers.
Yes, we are
of despair,
the number one superpower in the world. We are the top economy in the world. We are the guarantor of peace in the world.
10%
Hold on.
have eaten up
I understand it.
60%
Listen,
of the GDP.
income inequality is a huge problem.
In today's video, Abby Phillip and Bakari Sellers takes on MAGA Pundits on Newsnight with Abby Phillip as a fiery CNN debate breaks out over Donald Trump's aggressive foreign policy and US intervention in Venezuela. As MAGA voices defend power-first politics, Abby Phillip and Bakari Sellers push back with sharp facts about the risks to US allies, global stability, and America's credibility. So let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip and Bakari Sellers shut down MAGA Pundits on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
Tonight, the world is on notice, emboldened by the military strike in Venezuela and the capture of its leader, Nicolas Maduro. President Trump is now threatening several other countries. He's warning that they could be next.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States, and he's not going to be doing it very long. Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out. You have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together. If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States.
It's all part of Trump's bid for the Western Hemisphere dominance. But just how far is he willing to go to achieve that? Here's what his top White House advisor, Stephen Miller, had to say.
The United States is using its military to secure our interests unapologetically in our hemisphere. We're a superpower, and under President Trump, we are going to conduct ourselves as a superpower. It is absurd that we would allow a nation in our own backyard to become the supplier of resources to our adversaries, but not to us, to hoard weapons from our adversaries, to be able to be positioned as an asset against the United States rather than on behalf of the United States.
Now, just imagine that he was talking about China, and then you see Taiwan is gone.
I just said that.
By that rationale.
How does that make any sense, though? Because China and Iran and Russia, they just lost a strategic partner in the Venezuelan dictator.
Let me explain why it makes sense. Let me explain why it makes sense. His rationale is, we're a superpower, and we can do whatever we want in our hemisphere. China says, we're a superpower, we can do whatever we want. Why would we let Taiwan sell natural
resources? Wait, you're talking about the Iran whose nuclear facility was just neutered and World War III did not erupt?
I'm talking about China.
The Monroe Doctrine.
This is the triad.
I didn't say, hold on.
This is the new axis of evil, right? They all work together. They're all in cahoots.
Hold on, Caroline. Let's just take one at a time, okay? You're Taiwan, and suddenly China says, we're not going to let you sell chips to the United States. Why would we let you sell chips to an adversary? You're in our hemisphere. You're in our backyard. We're a superpower. We're going to just take you off the map. He seems to be laying the predicate there, Stephen Miller, since he's making policy in this White House. He's laying the predicate there for any country that sees itself as a superpower to do exactly what we just did. So how do we stop that?
But again, you're forgetting that those adversaries you just mentioned are already neutered by Trump's very strategic
China is
strikes.
neutered? How?
China's neutered because now one of its partners, Iran, is neutered because they all work together. They all collaborate pretty well.
China is neutered because Iran is neutered.
Do you think the message of this operation is that China will be empowered to attack Taiwan?
I'm just asking you to take what he said to the logical conclusion.
The logical conclusion, according to President Trump, is that he thinks we're in a new Monroe Doctrine where we control Western Hemisphere, China gets Asia, Russia gets Europe, and we split the world into three parts. Now, that makes no sense because in the 21st century, oceans are highways, not borders. But it's also a bastardization of what James Monroe must be turning in his grave right now.
This exposes the danger of treating raw power as a substitute for strategy. Abby Phillip and Josh Rogin are right to push back, not because they oppose American strength, but because history shows that unchecked interventionism backfires. The US has tried hemisphere dominance before, from Cold War coups in Latin America to regime change wars elsewhere, and the long-term result was instability, anti-American sentiment, and rivals filling the vacuum. What Caroline Downey's argument overlooks is that modern influence is built less on force and more on legitimacy. Countries align with the US when it offers predictability, rule-based cooperation, and economic partnership. That's why China's Belt and Road Initiative has gained traction, not because nations love Beijing's politics, but because infrastructure and trade feel more tangible than military threats. When Washington signals that borders and sovereignty are optional, it pushes smaller nations to hedge. There's also an economic reality missing from the power-first framing. Military operations don't fix migration pressures, drug trafficking, or supply chain vulnerabilities. US intelligence assessments show that instability in Latin America increases displacement and organized crime, which then spill across borders. Diplomacy, anti-corruption partnerships, and development investment have produced better outcomes at lower cost. Finally, redefining the Monroe Doctrine as permission to dominate ignores how global norms work today. If the US claims a sphere of control, it weakens its ability to object when China pressures Taiwan or Russia bullies neighbors. Abby Phillip and Josh Rogin are pointing out that credibility once lost is impossible to regain.
Because the whole Monroe Doctrine was about anti-intervention. It was about anti-colonialism. It was about Latin American countries being independent and sovereign.
How is this colonialism or imperialism? We don't exercise any sovereignty
over Venezuela. He said we're running the place and we're going to take their oil. That's the definition of it.
He's exercising leverage over Maduro's deputy, which is a good thing because, as you pointed out rightfully, she has a lot of skeletons in her closet and she's very much part of
the point
regime.
Is, when China goes to the third world, they come with economic offerings and benefits and infrastructure, and we say, if you don't give us everything you got, we're going to kill you, okay? Which of those do you think is going to work over the long term?
Can we just back up?
Do you know the Colombian president's poll numbers have gone way up in the last week?
Can we back up just a little bit?
He's the most popular leader now because of what Trump did. He's actually bolstering his enemies and driving them into our enemies' arms.
Let's back up just slightly because you're right. But also one of the
That's the opposite of what he wanted to do.
But also one of the problems with this foreign policy that dates back, nothing happens in a vacuum. And when we go back and we look at Elon Musk, for example, and we look at USAID, one of the problems that many people had when we talked about foreign policy was the fact that we actually had some soft power, right? We would go into these countries. We would do things like develop these programs, things that China is doing in this hemisphere that they still will be doing, things that China's doing in Africa, which we've advocated. We pulled ourselves out. So where is China growing their influence? Now, is China weaker because they lose 10% of their oil reserves? Yes. What does that have to do with the debt that our debt that China holds? Not much of anything. Is China still a superpower? Hell yeah. Will they flex their muscle against Taiwan? You bet against that if you want to. But I think we also have to look at a foreign policy that's run by tweet. We have a foreign policy that is disheveled. You all don't even have talking points about what the objectives were for kidnapping Nicolas Maduro. And the last part about it is, to your point, if Democrats have to hammer this, and stop writing these long-ass tweets and essays. He is choosing Venezuelans over Americans. He's choosing Caracas over the needs of these people, of our soybean farmers. We are actually talking about Greenland instead of inflation. Right. We're talking about invading other countries.
Saturday, he said we're going to spend billions of dollars rebuilding their infrastructure, right? This is a man who campaigned largely as an isolationist, who campaigned about pulling back and ending conflict. And in the first year of his administration, we've bombed Iran, Yemen. Now we've gone after Venezuela, as well as many others. I mean, this man doesn't see a problem that he doesn't think he can bomb his way out of or use the military to do. And frankly, I'm sorry, as a three-time combat veteran in Iraq and Afghanistan, I bristle when a five-time draft dodger bangs the war drums in Washington, D.C., because when elites bang the war drums in Washington, D.C., what happens is some young kid in a rural town in middle America, in places where I grew up, has to pick up a rifle, jump into a tank, jump into a helicopter, and do the tough thing. It's never Donald Trump. It's never people like Stephen Miller. They never have to do this the tough stuff. It's people like me and the people that I grew up with that have to do it. And America, again, is over all of this, right? They want peace. They want restraint. They want people to be smart about the use of power. Yes, they want toughness, but they want smart toughness.
What Bakari Sellers and Jason Crow are really tapping into here is something a lot of Americans instinctively feel, even if they don't always have the language for it. Brute force isn't the same thing as leadership. In today's world, power isn't just about who can drop bombs or threaten neighbors the loudest. It's about who can actually shape outcomes without lighting everything on fire. Take Latin America as an example. Over the last 2 decades, US military interventions and sanctions-heavy strategies have often weakened democratic institutions instead of strengthening them. Meanwhile, China has quietly expanded influence by financing ports, roads, and telecom infrastructure. The irony is that Pentagon studies themselves have shown development aid and anti-corruption partnerships reduce instability far more effectively than military pressure ever has. When Washington pulls back from diplomacy and soft power, it doesn't create a vacuum. Beijing fills it. There's also a serious credibility problem with carving the world into spheres of control. International law after World War II was built precisely to stop great powers from doing that. If the US normalizes the idea that might makes right in its backyard, it becomes much harder to argue against Russia doing the same in Eastern Europe or China tightening the noose around Taiwan. That's not weakness, that's consistency. And Jason Crow's point hits especially hard when you look at the numbers. Fewer than 1% of Americans serve in the military, yet they absorb the full human cost of these decisions. Studies from Brown University estimate post-9/11 wars have displaced tens of millions and cost trillions, with little to show in lasting stability. Most voters aren't asking for endless restraint or endless war. They want smart, disciplined power that actually serves people at home.
Let me play a little bit more from Stephen Miller. This is where he decries that after World War II, we've been abiding by, the rules that we created after that war. Listen.
For years, we sent our soldiers to die in deserts in the Middle East to try to build them parliaments, to try to build them democracies, to try to give them more oil, to try to give them more resources. The future of the free world, Jake, depends on America being able to assert ourselves and our interests without apology. This whole period that happened after World War II, where the West began apologizing and groveling and begging and engaging in these vast reparation schemes.
I mean, it's hard to know exactly what he's talking about, but he seems to be lamenting the idea that after World War II, we created a global order in which we said, hey, countries, don't run around invading each other. Don't depose people just because you can. Why is that such a bad thing that he wants to be gotten rid of?
So again, I say this with all due respect to your service, sir, and the perspective that you bring to this table, which I truly admire. But I really think this comes down to whether, the world, that post-World War world order was working or whether it wasn't. And if you were part of the elites in America, it was really working for you. And if you were working class, it really wasn't. Look at how far China got under that rules-based order. Look at what has been done to this country. The mass migration, the fleecing of the American working class.
Before you jump in, Bakari, and before you jump in,
think that crime and drugs and mass migration were bad and an emergency or not.
Batya, let me ask you to answer your own question. How has the United States done since World War II? How have we done?
Well, we did great until 1971.
No.
Starting in 1971,
seriously, answer
the
your own
elites
question.
got very wealthy,
how are we
and they
doing,
ate up 60% of the GDP.
How are we doing right now vis-a-vis the rest of the world?
I don't care about the rest of the world, Abby. I care about the American working class and the American people. I'm answering your question.
You just suggested that it was such a bad thing for the United States.
Yes.
We are
Deaths of despair.
the number one superpower in the world. We are the top economy in the world. We are the guarantor of peace in the world.
The top 10%
Hold on.
have eaten up
I understand it.
60%
Listen,
of the GDP.
income inequality is a huge problem, but there is no question, none, at all, by any objective measure, that the United States was not the greatest beneficiary of the world order that we created after World War II.
What Abby Phillip is pushing back on reflects a hard reality that often gets buried under culture war framing. The post-World War II order wasn't charity, it was self-interest. The United States didn't promote rules against invasion out of guilt. It did so because 2 global wars proved unchecked power creates chaos that eventually drags everyone in. That system coincided with the longest stretch without great power war in modern history, and US prosperity grew alongside it, not in spite of it. The idea that working class pain automatically traces back to global norms ignores domestic policy choices. Wage stagnation accelerated after tax policy changes, union decline, and deregulation in the 1970s and 1980s, not because NATO existed. Countries like Germany and Canada operated within the same rules-based system while maintaining stronger labor protections and lower inequality. That's a policy failure at home, not a conspiracy abroad. On security, Abby's skepticism is grounded in evidence. Pentagon reviews show military force alone rarely produces political stability. Afghanistan and Iraq cost trillions and still failed to deliver durable outcomes. Meanwhile, investments in diplomacy, trade enforcement, and anti-corruption efforts reduce conflict risk. Power used recklessly doesn't protect working families. It exposes them, and the human cost matters. Less than 1% of Americans serve, and those recruits overwhelmingly come from rural and working class communities. When leaders romanticize toughness without restraint, it's not elites paying the price. Americans consistently poll in favor of strength paired with caution, not escalation. That's wisdom earned over decades. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.